StreamYard says that we're live, and so we'll see how that works out. Hey, Doug, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh man, I feel really unsettled, a little exposed because I'm not sure what I'm doing here.
Yeah, I'll be in your boat pretty soon the next time I do a live stream, so.
This is supposed to be like fully integrated. So like the chats from the YouTube are supposed to show up here automatically, but I don't know how to tell if anyone is here or not at all.
So yeah, I guess we'll just wing it, and we'll see how it goes, and we could always check your stream later and see what happens. So
this is your live view on YouTube. Okay, I'm just gonna click this button and see what happens over here. So it'll be really, if anyone's watching, we'll look really silly. So, hey, I'm on YouTube and I'm watching us fumble around. And hey, oh goodness. So Matt C, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He is he's another comiker. He did the Kyrie campaign recently, and he's actually
nice. Yeah, I backed it.
But he said he left paranormals to come watch, so we better perform. So,
I was breaking up a little. You were breaking up a little bit there.
Okay, well, I'm gonna drop out that window and see if it makes a difference with the because it's browser based. So the more tabs you have open, the tougher it is for it to keep up. So I've got a few. I'm just going to go ahead and close out of. So okay, see if that helps at all. Holy cow! It all went black on me.
Yeah, my side's looking okay. So maybe your internet connection's a little iffy.
It could be. It could be. It's fine again now. But let's pretend that everything is normal, and let's just talk. So Doug, of course, you're a huge Spider-Man fan, and Spider-Man and the treatment thereof is kind of what got you into this sphere of indie comics. Am I correct in assuming that?
In terms of indie comics, well, I mean, Spider-Man got me into comic books for sure. I mean, I literally learned how to read on Spider-Man comic books. I've said this on my own channel and on Thinking Critical, Wes's channel as well. My brother used to literally read me Spider-Man comic books. Like he would sit me on a chair, an ugly green chair, or in his lap or whatever, and he would read Spidey comics to me. And so ever since the early 80s, I've been picking up Spider-Man comics and checking them out. Even when I'm a little behind on my reading or whatever, I got plenty of Spidey comics on hand. So I got some catching up to do. I haven't read all these.
Yeah, actually in the same way, not with Spider-Man per se, but last week or a couple weeks ago, I picked up my pull list from my local shop, and I read one comic, and it made me so angry I haven't made the time to go back yet. So I blame Brian Michael Bendis for that, but move on. So what is it about Spider-Man that you love that is your thing?
That's a really good question. So I mean, there's so many different angles that you could take with that, but one, his personality in terms of the wisecracking sort of when Peter has his mask on and he's nervous and he's making those sorts of jokes to almost kind of cover up for whatever fear that he actually has with the confrontation. When I was a kid, and probably still to this day, although I don't have confrontations, really but I used to make jokes. I used to laugh and those sorts of things. So that element of his personality matched with mine. I was kind of a thin, lanky guy as well as a young Peter Parker. There's that, and then with great power comes great responsibility. That always stuck with me. That was sort of ingrained into my head for whatever reason. That resonated with me and helped sort of guide me as I was a kid. And so there was that. And then I was telling Wes over at Thinking Critical recently that I never really thought about it too much, but my grandma was kind of like a second mother to me. She helped raise me. And I don't know if it was something with Peter, Aunt May's relationship, and maybe my relationship with my grandma, something along those lines. I don't know, but that had an effect on me.
What is it on the is there a particular storyline that you feel is the best or that you're most attached to?
That's another one of those questions where you could go in so many different directions. I've said before that the kid who collects Spider-Man is actually a very, very good story. It's actually in the back of an issue. It's like an add-on. It's very short. Basically, Spider-Man goes into, it looks like just a house at first or whatever, and he goes and he's speaking to this child who's like his biggest fan. He has all these newspaper clippings of his heroics, and they meet and they talk, and at the end of it, the child asks if Spider-Man can take off his mask. He wants to see who he really is. And like Peter, you could tell he struggles with it, but he does it, and then you're like, whoa, holy cow. Like he took off his mask, he revealed himself to this like child, and then like afterward, it's actually hard for me to even talk about it right now. I'm trying to control myself, but he leaves and he's actually at a hospital, and it's a kid who has cancer, and he's gonna die basically within like a couple weeks. And I don't know. That it's like to this day, it still like touches me. You can probably see my eyes right here. I feel a little awkward or whatever, but very powerful
I can't
story.
see it, but I can hear it.
Yeah, I don't know. Whenever I think about it, it touches me. So
1 second, I'm going to turn off my air conditioner. I think it might be giving us a little feedback.
yeah, no problem.
One moment. I've been thinking I would have turned that on before I left town today, so it'll be nice and cool. But I'll just suffer. So now Spider-Man, of course, has a lot of times seen as kind of the tent pole, a pinnacle, a cornerstone of the current or of Marvel Comics, such as it is. Why do you think that is?
Why is he the cornerstone of Marvel Comics?
Yes.
Sorry, I was trying to compose myself there. I was still thinking about that story. So usually I wouldn't have my camera on, so you would just see the avatar, so you wouldn't see how some of these stories affect me or whatever. But it goes back to him basically being the everyman, and so many people can see themselves in him, the underdog sort of element. A lot of people that grew up reading comics, maybe you were picked on as a kid. I mean, actually, I think the vast majority of people during the course of their lifetime, they've both been bullied, and they've actually, whether they want to acknowledge it or not, they've been the bully. But if you were just kind of a sort of introverted kid, like myself in some respects, I'm sort of like weird. It's like I have a YouTube channel. I talk to people all the time, but like I still kind of consider myself an introvert or something. I don't know. But anyway, I just think him sort of being that everyman really helped quite a bit.
Well, Carl has joined us, but it sounds like he's having some sort of audio problem. So I will go ahead and mute him for the minute, and we'll come back in a second and see if his mic's turned on there. So, last time he had problems plugging his mic in, and it sounded, for the life of me, I'm not even kidding, that it sounded like he was unwrapping what's the thing? Kind of like a Malabar with a plastic foil wrapper. I was just like, what on earth is happening? But that's okay. So, Spider-Man, of course, he's been a fairly contentious character. I would have to say, probably for the last 20 years. What are your thoughts about that? Do you feel like he's like been in the, or why has that been the case? I should say
A contentious character with fans,
I mean, like
or within the Marvel universe.
Well, the fandom seems pretty split over the course that Spider-Man's taken since.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've said before, ever since he essentially, for all intents and purposes, made a deal with the devil, the book has never been the same. And actually, Marvel itself has never been the same. I think I would even go so far as to say there might be some sort of metaphysical thing going on with Marvel when they take a character as iconic as Spider-Man, who he said is the cornerstone of Marvel, and he's a hero. Great power comes great responsibility. Boom, make a deal with the devil. A very, very important deal, and they have not been the same since. So there's that element of it, and there's always that sort of argument that, well, back in the day, where he couldn't be a married character because people wouldn't relate to married Peter Parker, blah 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 blah. I think that's all a bunch of BS, basically. It's just the when I was growing up, I grew up with a married Peter, and he was a newlywed. He was young. He was having fun with MJ. There was nothing. I don't know. I was a young boy, but I still loved the character, and there was nothing that turned me off about him being a married man at all with the book. And so I really just thought with MJ, she would be like a spouse who was, if you're a cop or you're a soldier, an infantryman or something along those lines, anyone who has a spouse who is in danger on a regular basis, that's essentially the dynamic that would have been created there. But they couldn't do that. They wanted him to be single and have endless kind of shallow, hollow hookups with women in relationships that would never go anywhere. You know, they're not going to go anywhere because they've set this precedent that he cannot be married or whatever. And so it just caused all sorts of problems.
I actually have a thought on that. Before I get to it, I want to try to bring Carl on.
Sure, no problem.
Mute the guest because he chose to mute themselves. Oh,
there we go.
How do I there, Carl?
Yeah, I'm there.
Oh, good. Carl, I don't know if you've met Carl, Doug, but he's a cartoonist. He does this amazing Popeye style cartoon called Holgrave over on Taptastic.
And excellent.
He's also a fun guy to talk to. So our usual co-host Matt Gibson make it tonight because he's having some stuff. So I asked Carl to fill in because I love having a third chair in case I can't think of anything to say.
No problem at all.
I actually have been. I thought about the path of Spider-Man and Peter Parker for a long time. I think that before I get into what I think is wrong, I think that you're right that married Peter is a great story. I think I likewise grew up with Pete and Mary Jane together, and they were so dynamic together. Mary Jane was in on all of the stuff. She knew about it. She was an active participant in as much as a woman who's not superpowered could be. And I thought they were just, that whole concept of being better together was very much of a factor with that. I don't think there's for my money, I don't think there's a story that better encapsulates that element of their relationship than Charles Vess's Spirits of the Earth. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
Off the top of my head, no.
It's completely watercolor. It takes Peter and Mary Jane has a distant cousin who has passed away and left her because she's like the last in the line, so to speak, of a medieval castle in Scotland. And Mary to keep the castle, but she has to go to Scotland to settle up the accounts and deal with all that stuff. So it takes them out of New York and puts them in the Highlands. And then there's this whole mystery that's part science fiction and part mysticism, and it's just great. And of course, Charles Vess's painting is gorgeous. In it, it's you get to see Peter be Peter and MJ be MJ, and the two of them be a real dynamic couple, and it's great. I love it. So
very cool.
Yeah, it's well worth. I actually happened across it at a Goodwill of all things. It was sitting there, and I said, "This is mine." I smacked it and put my
Oh,
money
you must
down and
have
took it
felt
home.
lucky.
Oh, I did. I'd not even heard of it, but I'm of course familiar with Charles Vess for he did a lot of work with Neil Gaiman on Sandman and on Stardust, and so I was familiar with him from that. But I didn't know he'd written stories at all, and I didn't know about this book. So when I saw it, I was and one I have is actually the Prestige, um, like copy that's all hardcover and it's got the slipcase and everything. It's pretty swanky. I should have brought it. That would have been a great prop.
Yeah, very
I
good.
was
Yeah, you always got to have your Spidey props. If you're talking about Spidey, you got to have them there. Random issues or whatever. So
and I tell you, when I was thinking about what are we going to talk about, I said, I'll bet we're going to talk about Peter and MJ. I'm going to bring up Spirits of the Earth. It's such a great story, and I didn't think to even bring it. It's sitting at home on the bookshelf.
yeah, I mean the earliest Spidey that I actually had was not even in the Amazing Spider-Man. It's Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man 101. I love this cover. It's all in black and white. I don't know if you can see it here, but yeah, it's one of
Let me see if I can find a way to highlight you on the thing here.
yeah, this is I got this in a grocery store when I was little. I think this was like the first time I asked my mom if I could have a comic book that's not actually in a comic shop, and I was just like, and she said yes. And then years later, I was talking to my mom, and she was just like, yeah, anytime you guys wanted to read, it didn't matter what it was, as long as you wanted to read, I was going to buy it for you. So she picked it up for us, and it was pretty cool. But like, actually, my brother, he was joking around with my mom last time we were together, and he was talking about how we were reading Daredevil as little kids, and Matt Murdock was, they had all sorts of drug use and prostitution and all that sort of stuff going on with the Frank Miller stuff. And my mom's like, really? I didn't know that. And so we were just like, yeah, we grew up on Daredevil during the Frank Miller days, and that's what we were reading about. And she's like,
Well,
well,
I haven't read a lot of Frank Miller's Daredevil stuff. I know I should have, but I haven't. But his treatment of Batman has all of that stuff in it too, but none of it's like appealing. I mean, it's all like dirty and it's got that edge. It's like, hey, you want to wreck your life? Try to do what these people are doing. So
yeah, well, one of the things that I like about the 80s comics is that they explore darker material, but at the core, the heroes are still heroic. They still have a functioning moral compass, and the ultimate message is actually usually a pretty positive one. And so that's why that sort of stuff, I was like, well, I mean, it seemed to set us on the right track, whereas today the moral compass is just like spinning all over the place.
So, do you think there was a particular moment or series of moments that kind of led us in that direction as far as the comic viewing public?
Oh man, well, I mean, a lot of people point to Watchmen and imitators of Watchmen and that sort of stuff, but I think in general it's more a cultural shift that you're just seeing the comics are downstream, politics and comic books and all this sort of stuff. It's all downstream from how should I say it? There's a cultural mosaic that is changing, and there's all these pieces to it, and so what we see in comics is just like a reflection of what's going on in the broader culture.
Yeah, I can definitely see that being an issue with that. I think there were moments in comics that we can point out as being gateways or thresholds to that sort of thing, where it and like you're talking about, Peter sells his soul or makes a deal with the devil, and then Marvel sort of follows suit with it. And while I don't disagree with that premise at all, it's very interesting in the comparison to Faust. Faust was damned to begin with. That the fact he entertained the bargain meant he'd already made the decision, and
Right.
that's one of those things that is I think more telling that there already was this going on.
I think with certain types of material, or even with the culture, when there's almost like a gravitational pull to ideas or something along those lines, including very bad ideas, evil ideas. And when you start going down that road or that stream, eventually you're going to be in that gravitational pull, and it's going to be very, very hard to get out of it.
I think one of the things, this is my own thing on here. But I think one of the early signs that we were having problems in terms of Spider-Man specifically was the Clone Saga. That there was such a hubbub about that, and it was a lot of ways it was the editors, I think, trying to have their cake and eat it too. I don't mean the original Clone Saga from the 70s. I mean the one from the 90s.
Right.
They wanted to try to have Peter have a natural progression and not keep him emotionally arrested at that. And as the story pulled him from child to man toward fatherhood, and at the same time try to tell a story by throwing in a Peter clone. I think so many people just repelled against the idea that
I was one of them.
Yeah. Well, and see, where I was at is I actually wasn't, right? Like I didn't like the idea about Ben taking over for Spider-Man, but this was coming at the same time as like the return of the sidekick was happening in DC, right? And so I was like, so we started having stories that were maybe a little more youth friendly, like Chuck Dixon's Robin stories had that edge that a Chuck Dixon story has, but if you were 12 and reading it, it wouldn't scar you.
Mm-hmm.
He was fighting against, people in mascot costumes and all sorts of stuff. And I think so. When the Clone Saga was going on and they were moving that direction, I was like, well, why doesn't Peter just move out to the burbs and have neighborhood adventures that are entry-level kid stories, and then you could have a separate Spider title that's intendedly marketed toward an older audience, right? So you could have some of those Sin Eater type stories, those things that are the Grimm stories that maybe involve Peter and maybe don't, but they don't involve Mary Jane and the kid because they don't belong where it's really grimy, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where I was like, I don't see why you couldn't frame it that way. But after the way the whole thing ended up is you've got Ben's really the clone, which is fine, and the baby gets kidnapped and maybe killed, and Osborn's back again for some reason, and then then Mary Jane's gone for a year,
right.
and it's really like at that point they kind of gutted the stories rather than deal with it, and that's kind of when I dipped out. I was like, yeah, I think you've gone. I think you're pandering instead of telling stories that I'm interested in.
Yeah, they lost the plot, and even so with the Clone Saga, I dipped out. One of the reasons, and I know they obviously fixed it or whatever, but it's one of these things where when you break trust with your audience, the idea that the Peter Parker that you were reading about for many, many years was not really Peter Parker. It was actually somebody else. Those sorts of things. It was all a dream. That's essentially what you're doing. And then I woke up from a creative writing sort of standpoint. It's one, that's incredibly lazy. But two, like I said, you're breaking trust with your audience, and they were waffling back and forth, and there was the negative feedback, and they had to fix it. And at the time, I was in high school, and I was naturally sort of I don't want to say drifting away from comics, but you get involved with girlfriends and all that kind of stuff. But I was just like, no, I'm done. Whatever. And I walked away, and then I didn't come back for probably 3 years. And that's when I really started getting back into it again. And then the Devil deal, I walked away again, and I didn't come back until my brother, he would randomly tell me to check out issues. And then I started blogging and reviewing comics, and then it just sort of snowballed from there.
Yeah. And one of the things that's really crazy for me about that whole thing is by the time the Devil deal happened, I had already, I wouldn't say I quit buying Marvel, because it was a little bit after that, but I definitely was not into Spider-Man anymore. Because part of the thing is Civil War was a world-breaking event, right? I
Yeah.
on the show before, but I mean, it was so dishonest to the premises, the fundamental assumptions of the Marvel universe, right? That I couldn't even get my head around how that got greenlit, you know?
Well, that
And,
was, and I used to get in trouble on the old Marvel boards talking about this. I've talked about before. I was banned multiple times across all these websites or whatever, but it's one of those things where they were trying to do a weird Bush allegory with the Patriot Act, and they were shoving it into the comics, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And the characters, what they did to like Tony Stark was ridiculous, and so it was like, again, these weirdo ideologues seeping in, and they're like, "Oh, we want to turn Civil War into a Patriot Act allegory," and bad idea.
yeah. I actually had a couple, about a month ago probably, I had number one Marmaduke fan on to talk about Civil War, and I brought out my copy of Civil War, which um, I got for like $5 out of a dollar bin. And through it, I have every time a character does something or says something out of character or how they were previously established, it's got a big old Sharpie circle around it.
Right.
It's every page is just dilute. It's just covered in Sharpie. I got so mad when I read that. I was just like, oh man. It was
Well, the
ridiculous.
initial idea was actually not that controversial in terms of, from my point of view, the idea that if you had the power of 10,000 suns or whatever, that maybe the government would be interested in knowing who you are, and maybe they would like you to at least be on file and letting them know, or something like that. Like, okay, that makes sense to me. If you could mind wipe your neighbor after you do very bad things to his family, like the government would have a vested interest in maybe knowing about that. But where they started saying, well, no, not only do you have to register, but you have to actually work for Shield. Or you have to actually like do whatever the heck we want. You're essentially some sort of like military personnel or whatever. And I was like, okay, that's like definitely a bridge too far, and it just got weirder and weirder.
Well, yeah, it's well, yeah, there are. I don't want to spend too much time on Civil War because there are so mountains of problems with the conceptual, the underlying philosophy of governance and you know, I that's kind of my thing. So I could spend a long time talking about that.
Well, yeah, and then you have like random X-Men or whatever that are apparently for. I'll stop in a second, but it's like Cerebro. You want to talk about civil liberties? It's like Iron Man's a bad guy, but Cerebro is totally cool or whatever. And you're just like, okay, this is why we don't try to needlessly shoehorn politics into our comic books, because it all falls apart in a Marvel universe.
Yeah, I mean, like the idea of you have the right to preserve your own life, right? Right, self-defense. But and if you live in a world where people can shoot beams of force out of their eyes or crawl up walls, that fits into that bailiwick. So you can't just you came with the equipment to fly.
Well, it's like if
So
somebody is
you can't.
they've committed all sorts of crimes. There are websites where you could go and you could see who's committed what crimes in your neighborhood. And it's like, if I live next door to Purple Man, I want to know about it. It's like I want to be able to, so I don't know.
Right, but you already like if he's Purple Man's already committed crimes, he already knows about it. But Franklin Richards, let's not think about the Heroes Reborn thing right now. Franklin Richards, who infinitely powerful, but if he doesn't hurt anyone with it, if he's just like, I feel like an ice cream cone,
Right.
what's the big deal, right? He's not hurting anyone. He's other than maybe other people in other dimensions steals their ice cream from, but we don't get into that too much. But yeah, so So I think one of the things that I appreciate about the Spider-Man character is that he's not just a man with a mission. I mean, he is certainly that, but he's also a metaphor for growing up and what that means. And that's one of the things that I've always really enjoyed about the character is that he starts off being a child and he's becomes Spider-Man and he pretends to be the man he hopes to be someday. And so as we go along and we read these adventures, we get to see him grow into that man.
Right.
He's set a goal, and he reaches that goal. And that's why actually I really do believe that like if they were being completely honest with the story, there would come an end point to Spider-Man's story where, the mundane things that we enjoy just become sort of, that's what his story becomes, dinners at, in the evening, going out to the park, giving the dog a bath, all that kind of stuff our savage young boys grow into these responsible men. I think we'd see that with Spider-Man too, and I think it's sort of sad that being the property of a major corporation, that he's not allowed to mature to where
Right.
I think his story needs to be, or would lead, I should say. But at the same time, if you were in charge of Spider-Man's story as a whole, how would you tell it?
If I were just given Spider-Man today, like, are you talking about like undoing the damage that was done, or?
That is not what I meant, but I want to know that too. So let's start with that.
Yeah, I mean, how do I say it? A good writer can fix a lot but there's always going to be those scars there. That's the problem with that. But yeah, I mean, for me, I would revisit the Devil deal and I would make sure that I handled that and I completely took that off the table. I said before, when I went away from comics and then I heard that there was an ends of the earth storyline, I thought Peter was going to go to the ends of the earth to fix what happened. No, it wasn't. That was the precursor to Doc Ock becoming Superior Spider-Man, unfortunately. But I would go back to the Devil deal. That needs to be taken care of, and I would make sure that Peter and MJ are married. That is where that's where I would go.
So, I have a couple of sets of questions now. But with that, you are currently writing or have written a supernatural thriller. How do you go about telling that story? Have you given any thought to that in the context?
How did I go about telling Soulfinder? Or
No. Since you already have experience with Soulfinder, how would that apply to a Spider-Man story with similar stakes?
I don't. It's one. So
I'm putting you on the spot.
For those that don't know, Soulfinder Demon's Match is my graphic novel that's coming out with Timothy Lim, and colors by Brett R. Smith, covers by Dave Dorman, and additional artwork by Matt Weldon. It's about combat veterans who are essentially turned into exorcists over the course of time. Anyway, so Soulfinder deals with exorcisms for sure, but with how do I say it? With it in terms of applying lessons learned from Soulfinder to Spider-Man. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I quite get the question per se. But it would be different because you're dealing with basically the devil, like the devil, or Marvel's equivalent of it. So it's just like it's a completely different universe. So maybe I'm not getting the question. I apologize.
That's fair enough. Well, and I also sprung the comparison contrast idea right on you in the middle of everything. So because the idea of Peter going on some sort of epic quest to face off against Mephistopheles and snatch back 5 years of his own life, that sounds like a really cool story. And how does somebody?
I would definitely like to do that. If somebody, for some bizarre reason, CB Cebulski said, "Do you want to write Spider-Man to me tomorrow?" I would be like, "Yes, I will do it for free." Actually, I do it for like $1. but I would do anything to fix that storyline.
Yeah, that would be I think right now, I think this is going to go on my wish list. Just, dear Santa, please let Doug Ernst write Spider-Man.
Yeah, years ago I actually debated doing I know like fan fiction has like a bad name or whatever, but I debated actually just writing a short story that essentially did fix that and then just releasing it out into the world. And then I was like, no, they're not like I'm not going to spend my time doing something that Marvel's never going to use. Like even if it's good, it'll only like a small amount of people will read it. Like why not just like start blogging and then YouTubing and then obviously writing my own comic book or whatever. But I would like to fix that story. I would love to do that.
Okay, so one more conjecture thing here. Because what I was originally asking was if you could take Spider-Man and plot out the course of his career. I mean, and even imagine you're in Tom DeFalco's shoes, back in the '90s, right, where you've got the editor's ears and you can go ahead and move this forward. What would you do to tell the Spider-Man arc? How would you carry that on?
Well, he's got to get married. He's got to have a kid, a daughter, most likely, and then he's got to struggle with being a good father in a quote unquote profession in which he could die on any night. Anytime he walks out the door, it could be his last. And like cops know that feeling, firemen know that feeling, military personnel know that feeling, whatever. But like that to me seems like you could get many really great stories out of Peter and MJ trying to be good parents in a situation where he also has a responsibility to the broader community and actually the world itself. And that pseudo ties in with Soulfinder. My character struggles with, he obviously has his own flock to deal with, but then he's also a brother, he's also a son. And so he's a military veteran as well. And so I like the idea of these different sort of commitments and responsibilities. That's another responsibilities that people have. And how do you be a good man? How do you live up to what life demands of you in terms of being a morally upright individual?
Yeah, that sounds, man, I would love that. Once again, I do look forward. I know we've got a few minutes before you got to take off, but I do want to go ahead and spend a little bit of time talking about Soul Finder. Are you in demand right now with that?
No, there's 5 days left on the campaign, and
Oh, okay.
then I'm assuming I got to talk to Tim. Most likely, we'll let it go to in demand. But so yeah, we have 5 days left. Last time I checked, we were at about $28,400 or whatever. So we're closing on $30,000. I'm extremely happy with the campaign. I've recouped most, if not all, of the costs involved. I might make it like a little tiny bit of money that, in my mind, is just going to go right into funding the next project. So anything that I make, the good thing about my situation is because I have my regular full-time job, is that that's my income, and anything that I would make on Soulfinder goes into the YouTube channel or the next project, hiring artists and colorists, hopefully Brett R. Smith in the future. Hopefully Tim will want to work with me again here. I know his 2020 slate is already like filling up. So, but that sort of stuff. And like I said, I couldn't be happier with the response to Soulfinder.
I'll tell you what, man. Tim is a monster when it comes to those projects. I tell you, I can't get over. He has a real job that he works at, and then he comes home and he just is cranking out projects. All of it is just top notch. I'm so impressed with him.
Well,
Yeah, I
sorry.
haven't seen a bad panel from Tim ever. That man is one of my art heroes, to be honest.
Well, like the weird
Yeah.
thing is, like I'll wake up in the middle of the night or something, and if I can't sleep, I might randomly check my email, and then like it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and then Tim is sending me finished lettered pages, and I'm like, when do you sleep? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Speaking of Tim, I did just pick this up. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, though.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I'm very excited. 'Cause I love some good satire. Speaking about Dixon, Dixon is one of my personal heroes there. So Dixon and Lim together, that's got to be good stuff.
Yeah, it's a fun book.
I'm excited for it. I've not had a chance to dig in yet, though, because, well, we don't need to get into that. Carl, do you have any questions for Doug?
I'm not sure. Let's see. I'm sorry, my mind is quite empty sometimes.
That's fine. You're probably drawing at the same time too, right?
Yeah, I am kind of doodling. Let's see.
It's a good thing. Is there anything here's a question. Is there anything about Spider-Man stories or comics in general that specifically inspired you to create?
Anything that inspired me to become a writer or just being it's one of those things where in many ways we're kind of guided by our subconscious mind in ways we will never comprehend. So everything you read, everything you consume, the movies that you watch, you're basically putting seeds in your brain all the time, and these invisible trees or fruit or whatever, it's like growing inside your subconscious or whatever, and it's guiding you. And so it's like your conscious mind is just the tip of the iceberg. Anybody who's into like lucid dreaming will know what I'm talking about. But your subconscious mind. So yeah, there's no, like I said, when I was talking about Soul Finder and a lot of the ideas that drive a character, they actually, in many ways, I could see where it all goes back to basically Peter Parker and Spider-Man and the stories that I grew up with as a kid, in terms of, like I said, with great power comes great responsibility. What happens when you have a responsibility to one person and doing the right thing actually causes friction with other people in your life who might not know about the hidden crosses that you bear on a daily basis. So it's like your boss might be like extremely mad at you for not doing X, Y, and Z, when in your personal life, you have all these other responsibilities that you're trying to juggle them all at the same time. And that's something that's at the heart of Soul Finder, and it's something that Peter Parker has struggled with throughout his run.
That's actually one of my favorite aspects of the classic Spider-Man stories, even stretching back to the Lee Ditko era.
Well, that's why when people, particularly Dan Slott, I probably shouldn't have mentioned him during the stream, but when he talks about the Parker luck, and people mistake him just having bad luck with the friction that is caused by doing the right thing with different groups of people. And it's like, no, there is an element of that, like loosely in my mind, but much of the problems in his life is because he's trying to do the right thing. And in fact, in many instances, he is doing the right thing, but other people that are outside of his Spider-Man persona orbit, they don't get it. And so I don't like when people just call it the Parker luck as this blanket thing and then just try and make bad things happen to him for no apparent reason. It kind of annoys me.
Well, I think it's the nature of the bad things that has
Right.
it. It's one thing to say, probably one of the most ridiculous storylines of old is the whole, Doc Ock, cozying up to Aunt May. Right?
Yeah.
Like, how did that make it past the editors to start with? It's the most ridiculous. But it fits because of, in the Spider-Man mythos, it fits because first of all, everything like intersects in Spider-Man's life. And second of all, because it builds in that conflict between Peter's personal life and his professional life, or whatever you
Right.
want to. And so it becomes something that's just like, well, how do you make that work in there? And it reinforces the themes of that conflict. So even though it's
Yeah, it's always like a delicate balance, and sometimes people have good intentions, but you need to have the right editor. You need to have like a friend who will pull you aside and be like, dude, that's a bridge too far right there. Let's not go there. And sometimes they don't, for whatever reason, they don't have a strong personality that could rein them in when they get creatively weird.
Now, you and I are both MJ people, right? We've talked about that a little bit, but there is the debate. This will be the last question because I know you said you got to leave.
Sure, no problem.
But there's a debate amongst Spider-Man. Well, I guess there's a three-way debate amongst Spider-Man fans: those that don't think marriage is the right choice, those that are MJ people, and those that are Gwen Stacy people, right? Where would you fall? I mean, obviously, I'm on the one side of that, but where would you? I mean, MJ, I think is your pick, but why?
Well, it's one of those things where, how do I say it? He obviously had a love for Gwen or whatever, but bad things happen to people. People get into car accidents, people get sick, people die, or whatever. Relationships end, and the fact that when you get married to somebody, if you actually take the institution of marriage seriously, that is his acknowledgement that I've grieved, I've moved on, and that you are the person that I want to live the rest of my life with. I want to bind myself to physically, psychologically, and spiritually for the rest of my life. And there's no doubt that Gwen would have a special place in his heart, obviously. But at the same time, you can't be a married man, but then feel as though always going around like, oh man, I really wish that Gwen was around because she's the one that I would be with, or like, he's obviously moved on. And I don't know, to me, it's weird. The idea that he couldn't be with anybody but Gwen is strange to me.
See, and I agree with you with that perspective, but I actually think that there's a bigger story in that makes an MJ a better fit. MJ knew about Spider-Man and all of that stuff, and she dove in anyway.
Right.
She came with baggage, but she was willing to leave her baggage behind for Peter and the stability that Peter represented. Right? She didn't need Peter to conform to her pattern. She knew that Peter would help her be a better her. I think that's awesome. And so in Peter, MJ found the stability she needed, and MJ, Peter found the vision beyond himself that he needed.
Yeah, and the whole thing in a healthy marriage, there's a reason why people say my better half or whatever. That you come together as a whole, you're better together than you would be separately. And so, like you said, they each have their baggage that they bring to the table. They've accepted the other person for who they are, and they're ultimately better for it. And MJ, when she's written properly, is just an amazing character. It's just when you get these short-sighted, shallow individuals that they don't know what they're talking about, or maybe in their own personal lives they never had a relationship with that was that deep or meaningful. Who knows what the issue is, but it's like some people just don't get it.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. And I think a lot of it is people. I do think that there is a truth to the fact that people try to, especially writers, have such an affection for where they find a character, like this journey, right? That sometimes that they get hung up on that. Like, and I think we definitely see that in the happening in the early 2000s, where a lot of writers had such an affection for the golden age stories, or the silver age stories they grew up with, rather, that they tried to foist that on characters in recent times.
Yeah, if you're a writer, you can't. you can't live in the past. It's like creatively, you can't be like the guy who's always trying to be the high school guy with the Letterman jacket or whatever the heck it is. You have to move on. And yes, it's nice. I grew up with certain things in Spidey's past. I had a great time, but you can't be a slave to nostalgia, essentially. If you want to do right by the readers, you have to do the right thing for the character.
Got to catch up to where the character has been.
Right.
And move on.
And if they really wanted to do that, I could understand like a one-off flashback issue as a sort of callback, but to try to forcibly move a character that's moved on from the past back into that past mold is, in some ways, it kind of breaks the continuity too much.
Yeah,
I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
It's like, if you love the character, it's creatively kind of like a mean. It's like a hellish, getting back to the devil deal thing. It's like, I would hate it if you took me today after being with my wife for so many years to then transfer me to high school with my high school relationships, or making me relive my high school days. Like, I'd be like, no, this is not happening. Like, don't let this happen, please. Like you said, a one-off deal. If it's just like a single issue revisiting flashback, like, that's fine. But to say you are a prison to the past, a prisoner to the past, no, thank you.
Well, and I mean, I don't think it has to necessarily be a one-off thing per se. When you look at like the DC did in the late '90s, they had several year one stories. Dixon did a Robin year one that told the untold story of Dick's first year as Robin. That was hella fun. He and Scott Beatty did Batgirl year one as well. That reinterpreted a bunch of those Bronze Age Barbara Gordon stories to make a more narrative. It was a hell of fun, and I don't see why we couldn't. If for those writers that have that affection for the characters, be able to tell that kind of story while still and even share what got them excited about those characters in their youth. Be able to share that with the next generation. I think
the key thing is, and so like I did a video on Taika Waititi or whatever, the Thor Love and Thunder director, where he was tweeting, it's like, you don't know what you want until I give it to you, or whatever. And it's like, there's two different kind of writers. There's that sort of writer who has this weirdo god complex, and they're, like we were saying, they're gonna foist things upon you because they're right, they're always right, and they can never learn anything from the audience or whatever. And then you have like a writer who is like, okay, again, I have to balance the expectations of the audience with my own overall vision. I have to like stay principled, but I could compromise on preferences. When it's a Marvel property, it's your own intellectual property or whatever. And it's like, how do I do right by the character? And so there's a difference between someone who's like focused inward on themselves and what they want to do because they think that they're awesomely awesome, and then the writer who is like, okay, I got to get this right for the character or whatever. And it's just like two totally different personalities.
It all boils down to humility.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. So, well, Doug, it is after 7 your time. When you said you had dinner plans, so I should let you go. Rather than let go of those ears. You can go on and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much for coming on and talking Spider-Man. I'd love to have you again, of course, because I like talking to you.
Yeah, man, I always enjoy speaking with you. It was great. Carl, it was great to meet you as well. And I just really appreciate you having me on. And like I said earlier, for those that are interested in good stories, Soul Finder Demons Match is still available for 5 more days in the campaign. So check it out.
And so hopefully this was I of course am super excited to get Soul Finder. What are you guys looking at for a ship date?
So our shipping, we put in the actual campaign, I believe we said November, sometime in November, but it looks like we're actually tracking to be early. It's just a matter of how early we can get it out. So I would like to get it out a month early if possible. But we put November just in case. But Brett's rolling along, and if we could do October, I would be happy with that. If we could even do September, I would be really happy about that.
Well, I am going to go ahead and try to share the screen and show off the campaign. We got that loaded up on the other page there, and see if it does that. That come up there? Can people take a look at that there? Because I tell you what, this explosion on the thing is just dynamite. If you guys are out there and haven't taken time to check out the Soul Finder Indiegogo and the art that's up there from Tim, you got to dig into that because it is good stuff. And of course, I have shared in the link the information to the campaign. Link is in the chat, so go ahead and click on that and throw down some dinero for the great stuff. So, let me see here. Okay, I think I'm back. We'll see if that worked. I don't know. We'll check the replay and find out how that happened. Doug, thank you so much for coming on and talking Spider-Man, and we will have to have you again, and maybe talk about the nature of meaning or something super boring.
Yeah, whatever you want to talk about, man. I'm always happy to, as long as I have some advance notice. Usually, I could make it work somehow. So
excellent. Everybody, you're not here to listen, but go ahead and give Doug a hand, and we'll talk to you later, man.
Cool. See you later.
Okay, bye. So, Carl, it's just us.
Awesome.
I didn't apparently. I wanted to have Doug on for the whole hour. I was going to spend an hour talking about Spider-Man and an hour talking about drawing inspiration from fiction. But I apparently wasn't clear enough with him because he hadn't eaten. So about an hour and a half ago, he's like, "I only have an hour. Is that cool?" I was like, "Sure."
I mean, we could still talk about Spider-Man and drawing inspiration from fiction and Spider-Man in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like there's only a couple people that are in the chat. At least, I mean, that are in the stream. I don't know. I'm on the StreamYard, and I've never done it before, so I'm not really sure if it's getting all the information correctly. Because on the YouTube when we were doing with the Hangouts deal before, did you ever go to the live studio that is part of the interface there?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Well,
there's a live studio that you can go into and look at some of the background stuff. And so it's got a little tracker. You can see when people come and go, and you can it'll show the chat up there without having to watch the video separately. So it doesn't do as much stuff with who's watching and all that kind of stuff. And you can watch people come and go live. You don't necessarily know who they are, but you can watch them come and go live. So you kind of get a feeling for what's going on. But you don't have that here. So it just has a little eyeball above my picture that says how many eyeballs there are. And it says there are 2. So I don't know what that means. But they have it. So what are you working on these days?
Oh, right now I'm just like warming up and doodling, drawing a very cartoony Spider-Man right now.
So is your camera off on purpose?
Yes, actually.
Well, I just didn't know because I'm trying to feel out the interface, So, it's fine that your camera is off. I just was curious. Sometimes I know that you have your camera off, or sometimes it's pointed at your screen, or at your tablet or whatever. So I'm just curious, just trying to see what I'm seeing. So I have since last week I said, I need to take some time to catch up on Holgrave, and you know what I didn't do this week?
Didn't read Holgrave?
Yeah, I haven't. Not only did that, I was talking to Doug before you got here. He was sharing some Spidey comics he hadn't taken time to read, and I said, I know the feeling. I just picked a bunch of comics up the other day. my pull list, I had an extra big month at the shop. So I got this huge stack of comics. I read one of them because Michael Bendis pissed me off with this issue of Young Justice. And it broke my heart so much that I set all of these aside for a couple of days. And I haven't gotten back to them yet. They've just been in my backpack for 2 weeks.
Dang.
Well,
What's it?
also, we had the end of our campaign come up. So that was last week was crazy. It's the end of my month at work. So that was crazy busy with making sure my numbers were in and everything. So
Gotcha.
problems. And I had an amazing thing happen this week that is added into that. I had years ago, when we first started doing Ideal Comics, way back in the day. Let me see. Actually, I'm trying to pull it up here, show off some of the stuff in it. Way back in the day, Chris and I decided we had a couple of stories, Chris Lawton and I, and that were really not connected, but kind of had similar themes and ideas. We decided to build a universe out of them. Then we were trying to decide what was going to be our first project that we were going to try to work on. That would be the thing we would try to put our effort into. And I came up with a story called Reason to Believe. And it was intended to be the first of my stories that was written specifically in the universe, right? And we found an artist to work on it and everything, and I thought the script was just perfect, and Chris went over it, and my wife went over it, and we're like, okay, we like this, and we started digging into it, and it was going to be this 64-page graphic novel, right? A big chunk of stuff. And the artist got about a third of the way in, and then just flaked off entirely.
Dang.
It was, oh yeah, she was just like, I can't do this anymore. And in fairness, she had some pretty intense stuff happen in her life, so I can't be mad, right?
That's understandable.
Yeah, it's just the way things go. And so it's been sitting around, waiting on stuff for quite a while, and because I didn't have, I wanted to find the right artist for the piece, you know what I mean? And I just couldn't find somebody who had the right feel for it, or wasn't any money to put behind it and everything else. And so I sat there for about 10 years waiting, and I worked on other projects, and we did Forces and everything, and our anthologies, just a bunch of other stories kind of took its place. And in the last year, I've been revisiting it in my mind, going over the story, and I've looked it through a couple of times, and about a month ago, I was like, this needs some significant changes. And I was talking to somebody there on the Twitter about the story, and kind of laid it out to this person. And they said, what about changing up X, Y, and Z? And I said, I have been thinking about changing up X, Y, and Z, and for very much the same reasons that you had for it. And so this week I went through, and it's not what you call a page one rewrite, but I'm rewriting the entire first act, and then reorganizing the rest of the plot points in a way that is going to drop the page count and going to give us a much leaner, much stronger story. I'm super excited. I finished the first draft of the outline. That will become the page-by-page outline that will become the script, because that's my process right now. So I'm pretty stoked about it, man. I'm hoping that that can be a third quarter 2020 project. So we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand having ideas that you can't quite execute right yet, and then you sit on it for a while, and then you're like, wait, I think I can do this now.
Yeah.
It feels amazing.
And one of the
especially, yeah.
Go ahead.
Especially when you when you finally figure out what makes the story tick, and you finally figure out what it needed, and you're just like, yeah, I can do it now.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things is this wasn't the first comic script that I'd written, but it was one of the first that I tried getting drawn. So there's a big difference between what you do with lettering and how you frame your dialogue and stuff. That I've learned a lot in the last 15 years about that, especially about lettering, because even a lot of our lettering that we're re-releasing Forces story by story right now, and going back through it, there was some lettering that we did, wasn't good. Right? And it's probably about 2-3 years ago that my wife started getting into the Flaming Carrot, and the gal who did the lettering for that, Roxanne Starr, kind of invented digital lettering, right? She's one of the first people to popularize it, and started making fonts specifically for lettering comics, and pretty much reinvented the art of lettering for the digital world. And we bought a bunch of Flaming Carrot stuff, and I just have been studying her lettering specifically, right, with how she laid it out and used balloons to emphasize the images and everything, and to make the speech pattern match the layout and everything, rather than just fit words around the action, actually using them dynamically. And so that's been a fun trip. And so I'm actually excited to revisit the dialogue we have, because the art that we have we can't use, which is a shame, because it's like 23 pages of art. We can't use any of it. But now being able to revisit
you got
that.
pretty far with it initially then.
Yeah, we did. And my wife was doing the inks on it. In fact, I'll go ahead and share the first. Give me just a second here. I'll go ahead and share that on the screen. And so this is the original art. And it is a little rough in some places, but in actuality, I know it's not as. And Amy was talking about it, that she was, it's been so long ago, and everybody involved has just honed their craft more. But it's got an honesty to it that was something I really wanted to capture for the story. So when looking for an artist, that's still something that I want to have, that's got that some of that frankness to the style. Now, of course, this was originally intended to be the first 5 pages, and none of it is going to be like that, because the entire first chapter is different now. So that's a big change, of that. But that's what's been obsessing my thoughts this week, was revisiting of all of that, because it's what I was working on, and I'm pretty excited about taking that there. Of course, we've got other projects we're working on too. So, and one of my intentions had been taking profits from Tales of Shadow and taking my share and paying an artist to do a preview, so we could of the pages, so we could go ahead and start generating up a little bit of interest. But we are covering the cost of the book, so there aren't any profits yet.
There's no buzz quite like having multiple projects on your brain.
Yeah, I tell you what, it is. Well, and that's kind of the world I live in, to be perfectly honest. I'm a bad one for for that, if for nothing else than just the fact that I always have a universe that lives up here, you know?
Yeah,
And,
I understand that. I have 3 that I'm working on currently, and one of them is only in the developmental phase.
well, I've pretty much tried to retain most everything to one universe. Just think that it's very expansive. We do have a macro narrative that we're working out. You won't have to read everything we've ever published to get the story. It's mostly contextual, right? But there is a big story about it that is about the nature of heroism. Interestingly, is a theme in Reason to believe it or not. Touched on that in the beginning, and that's been part of the subtextual of everything we've worked on.
Interesting.
Yeah. I have this theory about this. Something I call the heroism of the mundane, right? And I think that hero stories and why they resonate to people is that we all want to be heroes, especially boys. They all want to be heroes. But what we don't understand is that in many ways we are all heroes. I mean,
Or
just
at least we can be.
right. But I'm saying it takes a firmness and a strength of the spirit and a almost supernatural resolution just to survive in the world, right? We forget about it because in the West it's cushy and we have air conditioning, all that kind of stuff. But to make it out of childhood, because everybody's childhood is traumatic in one way or another, some more than others. But for most people, to make it out of childhood, adjusted enough, to be stable enough to settle down and stay that way, takes a strength of character that is that our fictional heroism is a reflection of that, and that's one of the things that so that's one of the themes that I've tried to work in stories I tell because it's kind of the way I see things. So I know that's probably a little esoteric and weird, but that's
No, I get it. I have a very similar view myself.
so. But yeah. So can you talk about any of the projects you have in development?
Well, if we already know about Holgrave, which is
Well, yeah.
coming along well, I'm going to put even more of that pulp adventure feel into it, as well as a bit more of the cartooniness in it, because Acts 1 and 2 weren't quite as, I don't want to say like silly, but they're not quite as out there as I wanted them to be. So I'm making sure that while I'm not going too far with the cartooniness, I'm trying to push the cartooniness a little more in the coming chapters.
Cool.
Exaggerate things, maybe have a bit more comic relief, but not too much to the point where it's obnoxious. Stuff like that.
Oh, I think that story is perfectly suitable for that. Yeah, I'm gonna forget their names. Terrence and Nathan have within them that same kind of energy that you have in is it Gabby, the character from Fleischer's Gulliver's Travels?
Yeah, I see what you're talking about.
Yeah, where it's deadly serious, the stakes, but at the same time it's also humorous, you know. I think that character, I think it's Gabby is his character's name, was definitely more slapstick, but that in many of the scenes in Gulliver's Travels specifically, the slapstick actually reinforces the severity of the events. Because the nature of it is, as comic relief, he exists to break the tension that's going on so that it's not quite as scary when, you know, Gulliver's being shot in the face with cannon fire.
As for the world in Holgrave, it's going to be a bit more developed soon in the coming chapters. Gonna have
fun stuff.
Gonna have more details on the kinds of denizens who live in Holgrave specifically, and that's gonna be fun because I hinted at them in Act 2 when the pirates said, "Oh, it might be the natives of this dump," and it's gonna be really fun when I reveal who and what the natives actually are, because it's not it's not something I think anybody's going to expect.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how that goes. I've got to catch up. So when are you planning on releasing the next chapter?
It's a bit early to say. I am sort of splitting the work on that between that and the aforementioned project with Matt the Younger, which
Yes.
I announced recently. Did you see that?
No, I did not.
Okay, so get this.
Is it over on Twitter then?
Yeah, it is a fan project that's meant to recapture the look and feel of the comic books, or not the comic books, but the around 16-page stories that used to accompany Nintendo Power magazine. They had like these little comic adaptations, and they weren't even really adaptations. Oftentimes they were original spin-off stories, or if they were adaptations of the games, they'd taken in a very creative and interesting direction. But they were like, it was almost like a magazine serial, because 16 pages wouldn't be enough to tell the whole story. So it would be 16 pages of comics would tell part one of the story in one issue of the magazine. Then in the next issue of the magazine, you do 16 pages of that story. And they gradually built stories filled with, what struck me about a lot of those early like Nintendo Power comics is that there was surprisingly high quality for comics based on it that are basically just, or at least they should be, cheap video game tie-ins. Like the Super Mario comic was surprisingly really, really good, and it was really funny. It had a wonderful, vibrant style and energy to it. It had a lot of goofy facial expressions. Sometimes it even broke the mold. Like there's this one scene near the beginning where things go bad in this Mario comic, and Mario makes a very serious, stern comic book style expression at one point with a dramatic close up on his face. He's just shouting, and it's hilarious to look at because it breaks the style so much. But with our project, we're sort of aiming to capture a similar style and tone to those kinds of comics, and it is a comic featuring Nintendo characters. This one is specifically Wario from the Mario series, and he goes on an adventure to find the treasures within Dracula's castle from Castlevania and loot it. Hijinks ensue. Things get crazy.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I've got my Chris Lawton, my writing partner, who is working on other stuff right now. But he, back in the day when he was in high school, had a website called the Castle Bathroom, and the entire thing was dedicated to reviews and fan fiction about Castlevania.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
In fact, his username online is CV Otaku, for Castlevania Otaku, and he's been. It's not up anymore, and I can't even. It's old enough that the internet it existed before and left before the Internet Archive was a thing, so you can't even find any. I think some of the web crawlers picked up the background on it. If you go to the archive.org, but none of the content was saved. So. I always told Chris he ought to, make a paper copy or something so that it's kept for posterity. And he's like, it wasn't that good. It was just like, okay, it's a funny idea. But yeah, there were Castlevania fan fiction. A lot of them were meant to be mildly satirical. So
that's exactly what this is sort of being. it's a fun borderline spoof in which Wario tries to raid Dracula's castle after hearing about the large stacks of cash the Count has.
That's hilarious.
I actually came up with that idea a while ago. It's just like, like a Wario Land game where Wario tries to raid Dracula's castle would be perfect, since those games often, like the plots often revolve around Wario, Mario's greedy anti-Mario counterpart. Just instead of trying to rescue a princess or something, he's just like, oh, I've heard about like this legendary treasure, and he sort of Indiana Joneses it up. I'm just like, that'd be perfect, right, for crossover with something like Castlevania.
Yeah, that does sound intriguing. But yeah, when it's going, you'll have to let me know. My one son Taliesin is a huge retro game fan. He's 16. He's a giant retro game fan. That kind of thing is right up his alley. So, but yeah, I missed your announcement somewhere somehow about that. So
Yeah, well, I posted it on Twitter. Let me see if I can see. I tried to like post like a page I have in the chat, but it doesn't actually post images there. So
yeah.
that's a tricky thing. Let's see.
Maybe it's on. Have you put that on the Discord at all by chance?
I do believe I posted, let's see, part of it on the Discord. Let me check.
Because I can look there.
Yes, I have posted some art of it in the Discord, including the entire first page.
Sweet. Well, I will go check that out at a later date.
We're calling the story Sylvania for obvious reasons.
That's funny.
As for the other
So,
one,
like a single story, like an end game figured out on that, or how's the?
we have the entire story plotted out, and it's going to be split into 2 parts, each around 16 pages. First half being Wario entering the castle and running through it, and the second part being him fighting Dracula in a comedic fashion.
Oh, cool. So I just recently, and I have not had a chance to play with it. I just recently purchased a Clip Art Studio or whatever it is.
Clip Studio Paint.
There you go. That's the one.
Yeah, that's the program I'm using to edit whole grade pages and to color the Castlevania pages.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to really play around with it much because I've been super busy. I've been meaning to actually get together. I've got some art for the current quote unquote current Forces story that we're wanting to put up on our Patreon until such time as we get caught up to it on the main Forces page. And honestly, I don't even know if anyone is. I haven't had a chance to look at the stats. I don't know if anyone is even reading the Redux pages that we're doing. I have no idea if that's even happening. But I'm doing it anyway. So I'll be putting up another batch of stuff tonight to upload. I'll upload in the morning and everything. So that's just been what we've been about. Our web guy, because we've sort of hired a web guy, tells me that at some point in the fairly near future, in the next couple months, he's working on building a bot that we can upload just the whole story at a time rather than upload every page from a story at a time. And I'm looking forward to that because coming up on the list, we have some nearly 100-page stories that exist within the thing. And it's a big jump from 6 pages to, 12 pages to 20 pages to, yeah, that's a lot of time sitting at a computer when I could be home or something. You know?
Yeah.
'Cause I'm still living in 1998 and I don't have internet in my house. So,
That's actually not such a bad thing, you know.
well, when we're trying to run an online business, it's a hassle. Um, and we are actually planning on, um, like for example, our our web, on our website, which isn't what it needs to be, idealcomics.net. I'm going to put a link in the chat. But we're going to be putting up there a bunch of features that aren't in place yet. And one of those is going to be a pre-order page for Tales of Shadow so that people can, if they want to, pick up a copy between now and December when we go to print with it.
Nice.
So we'll be able to have so even though we didn't meet the necessary numbers to stay going demand, we'll still have that open. But I haven't been promoting it at all because there's no place for people to go yet. So I was just talking to Steve, web guy, about that today. He's like, got some ideas, not done with it yet. I was like, okay, that's fine. But I don't know enough about web coding to make it happen, so I can't complain. And he's worth way more than we're paying him, so. I have to be patient about that. I can add content, I can't do framework. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I'm not really a content. I mean, I'm not really a framework guy either. I'm definitely a content guy.
So, but yeah, so next weekend also, I know you can't come, Carl, because you live far away.
Mm-hmm.
Land of alligators and meth, I hear, right?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah. So we don't have alligators. I'll say that. But next weekend we're going to be in Fort Collins, Colorado, across the border. We're going down to the Fort Collins Comic Con, try to sell some books. So I'm excited about that. But that's excuse me. That's what's going on with that. So we're hoping we could have some mini comics ready to go. I'm not sure where that's sitting with it. But, yeah, that's the hope. Having that. We've got some of our anthologies ready to be printed. We've got some postcards to send out, all kinds of stuff. Man, I am just winding down. I know we've got 20 minutes in the show left, and I don't know if it's true, but StreamYard is saying that we've got one person watching. I don't know who that is.
Thank you, loyal viewer.
Thank you, loyal viewer. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know who that would be. But I don't want to just I feel like it would be cheating to not give him something to listen to. I mean, for all I know, it could be the metal and he's just listening while he draws, but nobody's saying anything. So I feel it could be Pickles. He could be hanging out still. I have a suspicion that after Doug left, that Matt C cut out to go back to watch Paranormals, which I can't blame him for because Elliot and Brian are more interesting than me.
And me.
Well, especially with where we're at, we're just sort of yakking. But Elliot and Brian, they actually have an itinerary. They have prepared slides, and it's a real show. And we're just a talk thing, and without even a guest, because I was expecting Doug for 2 hours. Totally my fault. I'm not mad. I'm just a little disappointed in myself. So, what are some inspirations that you get from literature, life, history?
Well, from life, it's basically anytime this is weird, but anytime like something bad happens in my life, either tangentially, like something bad happens to a family member that affects me, or something bad happens to me directly, that impacts the way I look at how I like draw or write characters in some way, even if it's tiny. Like it's weird, but knowing how like a certain like any kind of pain feels is actually pretty great for writing and drawing, especially if you're a cartoonist and you have to deal with things like slapstick comedy. You can know how to make something look hurt and make it look funny, or make something look like it hurts and make it look very, very excruciating. As for history, I'm all over the place with history, man. My my alternate dimension universe thing that I build a lot of my comic stories in, including and especially Holgrave, is derived a lot from things I've learned from actual world history. In fact, to be honest, a lot of it is just parallel to real world history, just with uh, science fantasy stuff and cartooniness, sprucing it up and making it all weird. I do think growing up in a Christian household, reading the Bible and whatnot, that had an impact on the way I write and draw stories as well. And while I don't really think every story requires a overt moral, I do think, regardless, certain themes, even if I'm not trying to put them there immediately, will prop up. If that makes any sense. Like if you want to do a joke, and it's I think a good like example is old-fashioned cartoon humor slapstick involving like a character getting drunk or something. If I do that, it always comes back to the like a character getting doing something silly is funny because that thing was brought upon themselves. It's something, and that's not necessarily an overt like stated moral. Remember, kids, don't do this or don't do that. But it's sort of an implicit. Yeah, if you do this dumb thing, there's another dumb thing that will absolutely happen to you as a consequence. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, and all that. If
Yeah,
that
for
makes any
sure.
sense.
No, I think that's an absolute. I think that there's a lot of truth to that. We have there's this implicit morality play aspect to the way that we frame structures and stories and ideas, and I think sometimes we forget how ingrained all of it is, and so sometimes people feel the need to try to push um, that into something different, right? We feel the need to make it too obvious, right?
Yeah, when
Um,
it really isn't a necessity to do
right,
so.
because I mean, it can be obvious and still be have enough room for people to internalize it on their own speed and their own tempo. Um, because I mean, that's I guess part of the thing is that like when we learn something, let me back up. I'm gonna go at this from a different direction. We have this bad habit of um, trying to tell stories. Nope, nope, that's still not coming out like I want. Three. I had a conversation a couple of years ago with a gal who is a doctor of education, right? She has a doctorate in education and also in mental health, right? And
Mm-hmm.
her job is coordinating mental health services and education, like trauma informed education for teachers in West Nebraska. Very smart gal, very on top of it, just a really good person. And we were talking about finding ways of integrating what I do, which is provide life skills education to mentally ill people, with what she does, which is provide mental health awareness education to teachers, right?
Mhm.
In talking about this, I said, one of the things I think is a problem with the educational system is an expectation problem. And I said, don't take this the wrong way because I'm not trying to be insulting, but in a very real sense, it's not possible for teachers to educate children. I said, because what learning really is, learning happens entirely on the student side. You can't force learning. Educators just present the information in a way that the student can absorb that information. But they can't put that information in the kid's head. The kid actually does the work of that themselves. Even the best teacher is still limited by the fact that that learning has to come from within the youth. Um, and she acknowledged that had a point. And that's one of the limitations. So with storytelling, one of the tricks that we play on ourselves is the idea that have implicit information in them, and they're one of the best ways we have of pulling that information into ourselves, right? Because of that, we very much know that we learn through stories. I think one of the things that's the temptation is to make them too on the nose. And instead of being a metaphor, instead of being um, uh, knowledge, instead of being a metaphor, instead of being a way for us to shape our thoughts around those implicit story elements, people try to make it unmistakable what their message is. And in doing so, they end up being something more akin to propaganda than story. And that's, I think, one of the problems that a lot of modern comics, I think, that try to look at it as an exclusively left-wing venture. That because this is another thing, I actually think that story is an intrinsically right-wing, especially hero stories are an intrinsically right-wing phenomenon. And so I think that's why left-wing stories always end up feeling like propaganda because you can't really tell a left-wing superhero story. And the reason for that is, we can talk about that in a second if you want, but it is an interesting fact that left-wing stories always end up being propagandic. But yeah, over the six. I just saw something ridiculous on Twitter that I'm not going to repeat. So, but yeah, that's the story. That's the thing. So here's a question for you. You deal with an alternate history, an alternate timeline. Does your faith beliefs impact the shape of your universe at all, or do you not touch that?
I touch on that, yeah. It's not too overt, but things like angels and whatnot do exist, and there is implicitly a creator. It's sort of a Aslan type situation, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. We have a very developed theology within our universe, but it's also, we don't really talk about it at all. One of the projects that is in the works, someday we'll release it. We are working out a 2d6 role-playing game system that is built upon the supposition of our universe, but is intentionally designed to be flexible enough that it can apply to any superhero universe. But in our guidebook, we've got a breakdown of our different races. We've got like werewolves, and we've got humans, and we've got vampires, we've got trolls, and we've got aliens, and we've got like the Dawnins, the Fomorians, magical races, that kind of thing. And we have angelic races, demons and half demons and angels. And for angels, here's the, if I can remember the thing from memory, angels do exist, and they don't work for you, and they're very busy.
I like that.
So, with it, I mean, like there are places in our history where the angelic and the mortal realms have crossed, but an angel will never come to the rescue of a hero. In any, Deus Ex Machina does not play out that way. So angels have their own things to do, and part of what separates the demons from the angels, because we went with a very Renaissance concept that the demonic realms are fallen angels. In my theology in the real world, I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think that's one possible reading of the text, but I don't think it's necessarily the case. But for the sake of our fiction, that's the story we went with. But one of the things that separates the angelic from the demonic, is that the angels don't serve their own purpose. So they're not they can't be swayed, and they have their own business. They tend to the creator, whereas the demons, they have their own schemes and their own plans, and they listen to their own counsel and all that kind of thing.
So my phone battery is nearly dead. I'm gonna have to switch over. I'll be back momentarily, but I do have to leave right now.
Well, okay. Well, hey, Carl left. What did he say? We still have one viewer, so somebody is out there not saying anything, still watching. Unless it happens to record me being the thing. Who knows? Who knows how that works? I know, that's for sure. So I'm going to keep yakking because I don't know what else to do. I honestly was thinking that I might end up getting some coloring done, but that's just not going to happen. I am bushed. Actually, you can tell it. I look tired. I can see looking tired on the screen. I'm not as pink as I normally am. But yeah, that's the story. We only have 5 minutes left, so if Carl had said, I'm just going to cut out, man, call it done, and that would work, but I'll have to add him. That's right. It doesn't come automatically.
And I'm back.
And you're back. So here's one of the weird things about the StreamYard. Like, you join in, and I have to add you. You don't just pop up automatically.
In a lot of ways, that's actually a pretty good idea.
Yeah. It's not a bad setup. It's got some different kinds of tools. This is one I really like right here. I can show up different people's stuff, like messages from the chat, and share them on the screen. Like right now, there's my scrunched up face saying idealcomics.net. So that's the idea. If I pay money, I can employ banners and stuff, import them from other things.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah. Actually, let me create news. This is here. Hang on a second. Well, I tell you, at the same time, I feel a little mixed because, oh, hey, there you go. Now I have created a banner that says forceofgoodandevil.net, so that
Nice.
the one fellow watching can go ahead and see where they can get new content tomorrow morning. Well, maybe tomorrow morning. I'm not sure. I'm going to stick around and try to upload all of the pages. So next story that's coming up, we just finished the the greatest villain of all time ever, which is the first full, it's the third issue, and it's the first full Greg story. And in it, Greg is snatched into a closet by the headmaster, not the headmaster, but the guidance counselor of Villains School, Baron von Strichter, and given a list of 5 steps to be the greatest villain of all time ever. And I can't even remember all of the steps, but throughout his day, he's reading these things while he's getting bullied by the other villain students. And it was an excuse to go through and introduce our supporting villain cast while he's just beat to hell through the course of the day. And we really enjoyed it. I like putting Greg through his paces has been one of the I don't want to call it a joy of the story, but it does feed that wicked little bit of my spirit that finds tragedy hilarious. So, Andrew Klavan, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Andrew Klavan. He's a novelist and political pundit. But he says that if it wasn't for the human suffering, sin would be hilariously funny because we so disgrace our own image by committing to the depravity of our spirits. It's the perfect example of the highly divided comic theory. We should be glorious, but we're dirt. And if it wasn't for the tragedy of human suffering, that would make it for the greatest comedy, which plays up in things like Falstaff in Henry V, right? And I don't disagree with him on that, but there's also part of it that just finds a guy stepping on a rake funny, and that part of you that finds stepping on a rake funny is the same part of you that at least that's the same part of me that enjoys a little bit of torture on Greg. Easy Bake Coven has arrived just before it's time for us to call it a night. Thanks for coming. I appreciate that. So, Easy Bake, are you aware that tomorrow Thrasher's relaunches on Kickstarter? Some old metalhead is putting that together. Story, of course, and we'll have to have him on the show in September probably. Talk again about his thing. But story of some metalheads that are present when the world is invaded by aliens and how they survive. So I'm excited to see that project. I'm hoping I have the scratch to support it, but there's a couple that I haven't been able to get any money behind last month that I really want to get. Yeah, tomorrow at Indiegogo. Do you follow him on Twitter? He just put a post up about a half hour ago.
I do indeed follow him on Twitter.
I was actually talking to Easy Bake Coven, who just put another message in the chat. So, that was really rude. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, hey, Star Storyteller just showed here. Everybody's getting here late. Guys.
No, better late than never, they always say.
Oh, yeah, but I was just talking to Carl about cutting out because no one's here. And Doug Ernst was here in the first hour. We had a great conversation about Spider-Man and the everyman archetype and everything. Oh, I see. School's back in, so I don't know if my schedule would be compatible. Oh, okay. Well, we'll have to see how that works, though. So the other thing too is one of the things I need to do, learn how to do, is pre-record, because there's some people I've talked about having on that just can't make the time slot for different reasons. And for some reason, I'm stupidly dedicated to the idea of this being a live show. But I want to learn how to pre-record segments, go ahead and run the segments back, and then you can be live in the chat while the live segment's going on. So that's something that I want to learn how to do. So oh, okay. So Easy Bake in the chat says that he's in Twitter gulag right now, so that's why he hasn't seen any notifications, because he's been temporarily temporarily suspended, I guess.
You know, Matt the Younger pointed out that he couldn't see you anywhere coming.
Couldn't see what? Oh,
He
Easy
couldn't
Bake
see
anywhere?
Easy Bake anywhere. Apparently,
Yeah,
it's because he was indeed Twitter banned.
yeah, that's terrible. And Star, I am not in school. I was reading Easy Bake's. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I was reading Easy Bake's thing out loud. Um, I am following the Billy Joel and Bob Dylan method of higher education, which I'm hoping to become so good at what I do that people just throw degrees at me.
Honestly, that's kind of what I'm doing at this point.
Yeah, if it's good enough for Bob Dylan, it's good enough for me. That's what I say. Actually, that's not true either because adultery is good enough for Bob Dylan, and I'm trying to avoid that. So
Good
I,
idea.
I prefer to stay with the wife of my youth,
Monogamy is good.
not have her ditch me because I slept with Joan Baez. So actually, I'm not even sure if Joan Baez is still alive. That could be a really tacky joke.
That with context, if that is true, that sounds like a million times worse.
Oh, Easy Bake says I'm more partial to Billy Joel. Yeah, I do wonder what kind of school Easy Bake is in. I am curious about that.
Metal school.
Middle school. I think from the Twitter conversations we've had, I mean, I'm not a huge metalhead, but I'm pretty sure he could teach a class at metal school.
Metal school rising revengeance.
He knows his stuff, man, 100%. I was listening to a Twitter convo he was having with some old metalhead, and those guys were just yakking away. It was really impressive. So, but yeah,
So I guess are we gonna go back to the topic of things that inspire us, whether it be fiction or what have you?
yeah. We can keep going about that. We've been talking about fiction and its place in story. I speaking of which, I'm going to do a full review for the channel. Um, Sorry, in the chat, they said he could teach a genre history class, but instrument lessons, fuck no. I did mean genre history. I don't even know if you play. But oh man, it got me so distracted from what the heck I was talking about. Religion. Oh, I want to do a full review. I got Gilly Gutierrez, his last name, I can't remember, but the Pistolera comic that was crowdfunded a few months ago came to my mailbox yesterday. And I did pick it up and read it as soon as I got home. And it's good. I don't want to get too much into it right now. But it took me a little while. It is a little on the nose with its discussion of faith, but in the genre it's telling, I think it is actually really good. So for you guys who follow me here on Twitter, keep an eye out. I'm going to be doing a down and dirty review of it on the channel. I just got to decide if I'm going to try to film that tonight or tomorrow. Because it uploads really slow on my phone. Anything over like 7 minutes takes like 30 minutes to upload to my phone, which is ridiculous. I don't understand, and this is something, Carl. I don't know if you have any idea about this, and I don't expect you to, but I'm talking to you, so we're going to go this way with it. I don't understand why you can watch a video, you can live stream in real time, but it doesn't can't upload in real time.
That's a good point.
I don't understand how. See, in the old days, right? Because like, and maybe it does this still, I don't know, but the way the web works, right, is that it takes, and I don't know if streaming works this way, so it might not. But the way the web works is when you go to a website, right? What happens is you send a command to a server, and it sends a command to another server, chain, bing, 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 whichever servers are free, to the host servers, right? And then it breaks all of the content from that site down into packets of information. And then those get spread out to the network. And it ramps pings from server to server to server, these little packets headed toward your IP address or the IP address that filters stuff out to you, depending on the kind of network you have. And it brings it all back together and reassembles it, right? And that's why back in the dial-up days, you'd see different elements load at different times. It wouldn't just be straight down the page. Sometimes this picture and then this picture, and it would just pop up at random because your browser would reassemble all that stuff into your page, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of and some sites would be built with Java because the Java would actually process all of the coding on your computer side rather than process it on the server side. So for some kinds of effects, it was faster to have Java applets built in than using regular web coding. Okay, so, but I think streaming pretty much sets up a direct connection the time you set it up from you through the quickest servers to your, from the thing through the quickest servers through. I don't believe it breaks it up packet wise like it used to. And I think that's the difference between streaming video, streaming audio, and like the way that watching pre-recorded YouTube stuff. I think because it takes a lot more data to stream than it does to play pre-recorded stuff. Okay. But you'd think that if you can watch a video, then you should be able to, if you can stream a video in real time, you should be able to upload it in real time too.
Maybe that would take up way too much data.
Maybe for the value of the property is all, maybe they just don't do it. Maybe you could. Maybe they don't do it that way on purpose. That would make sense.
Yeah.
That would make a lot of sense. This is riveting conversation, right? See, this is side note, right? This is the thing a few years ago. Well, it comes up like every 18 months, people start talking about net neutrality. And I don't want to presume where you stand on net neutrality, right? But the way the internet works, like net neutrality laws would actually lock us into a system that would keep us from developing faster ways of doing the internet. Things like streaming didn't used to be possible, right? That the net neutrality laws are actually anti-competitive. And so faster, cheaper products wouldn't exist under net neutrality stuff. If those laws had been in place years ago, then we wouldn't have mobile internet and things like that because it was in contravention to the ideas that were in place at the time. And mobile internet is actually like a para-internet, a secondary internet system, all those mobile internet sites, than what was existed 5 years ago. And that's one of those things that's so I know a lot of tech-savvy people that are very pro net neutrality, but what it ends up doing is stacking the deck in favor of big corporations for there to comply, whereas and big corporations can comply to these ridiculous regulations, and the loss of service doesn't hurt them because they end up developing de facto monopolies. And so they don't care that they're producing a worse product because nobody else can buy anything. And that's one of those things that
It's a good point.
Yeah. So, and like a lot of the people I've talked to, even the tech savvy people that are pro net neutrality, they come from a place, a lot of them live in these big cities. And so the idea that they're getting less than optimal service from these big companies, and the idea that there would be a fast lane, a slow lane to the internet appeals to them because they get substandard service. Part of the reason they get substandard services in a lot of metro areas, specific providers end up getting exclusively contracts with the cities, so they don't have any competition. So they're able to build their network cheap and then overburden it because there's no competition in these areas. And where I live out in the sticks, right, our internet came in pretty much all at the same time, and we have like 4 or 5 major providers that are constantly in competition with each other. And so, like, we have really fast internet for a town of 25,000 people.
Funny you should mention competition, because the third project that I've had in mind that takes place in the same universe as Holgrave does actually revolve heavily around that concept of the importance of competition.
I do think it's important.
The businesses and stuff are not like they serve a very fictional purpose for the fictional universe that I have set up, but it is still very much a story of the little guy trying to make their way up in the world, and as well as maybe the story of how things could go horribly awry in a case where maybe certain organizations have too much power and are uncontested in some way or another.
Now, here's a great little tidbit. Actually, if you can find this, I saw an amazing YouTube video that was made probably 10 years ago now. And I believe it was on a book called The Myth of the Robber Barons, right? And it's a history of the Gilded Age, told from a very honest but pro-capitalistic perspective, and talking about how a lot of the robber barons that we had, I mean, there definitely was some bad play that happened there too, but talking about the difference in free market versus centrally central planning that was happening in these real-time experiments in the 1870s through the 1920s. Anyway, I think it was Bill Whittle that did the interviewing on it, but I might be wrong about that. But one of the things in the story that I found most fascinating, one particular story, was Vanderbilt. Are you familiar with the Vanderbilts at all?
Yes, I've heard of them.
Okay. Well, I mean, like they built that, one of the original Vanderbilt, one of his grandsons built that giant house up in North Carolina. It's like the largest residential building ever built. It's got a weird name. The Biltmore Estate. Look it up. It's super interesting. Anyway, Vanderbilt himself was in shipping, right? Steam shipping. And they're originally from Holland, if you couldn't guess by that name. Bilderberg. Where's Bilderberg? I don't remember. I'm remembering 2 different things now. Damn it. Wikipedia later. Anyway, the point is the original Vanderbilt got on when they were first doing like steam shipping, and James Fulton, I think it's James Fulton, who invented the steam engine, didn't invent it whole cloth, but he made and patented the design that became the standard in America. There was a British guy who was doing like the same kind of stuff at the same time, but Fulton got the big name from it. he approached the New York State and got the exclusive contract for bringing anything into New York City, right? And his company ran the ferries from New Jersey to New York, and anything coming in had to be all that kind of stuff. And his his history record, the record of the safety of their ships and how much cargo was lost, it was pretty terrible. But they had the contract, so they didn't really care. Right? There wasn't a need to. The prices were really high. Part of the reason that Boston and other ports ended up being busier ports than New York in the late 1800s was the fact that they didn't have any exclusivity contracts, and Vanderbilt was selling tickets to America for cheap, right? So people could afford, and so a lot of the mass migration that happened in the later half of the 20th century happened because Vanderbilt's prices were really competitive. They were so competitive that he wanted to get to and from faster, from Europe to America faster. And so he got some engineers and he said, I'm going to give you guys a bonus, figure out a way to get here faster. And they invented the nautical screw, right? That propeller that ships use to this day. The proportions that every nautical screw is used for the last 150 years were the ones that Vanderbilt's engineers figured out so that they could get a bonus. and that was possible because competition, right? So, there you have it. But yeah, the myth of the robber barons is I think you can find it on YouTube just doing a search on that way. So really.
All right, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, and it might fit into the thing you're working on anyway.
In a way, yeah, I think so.
I think it's Bill Whittle that is doing the interview. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Whittle's stuff, but he's
it still will have a lot of that aviation adventure and air pirate stuff as well, because the story in part revolves around privately, like basically there are a lot of small delivery services and whatnot for various they're airships that are specifically made for freight and carrying cargo. They're specifically contracted by businesses and even things like mail services and whatnot for transport. And those airship services in turn also contract people to help protect the airship in case of air pirate attacks. And the story does revolve heavily around that concept.
Yeah. I love your world so much. It's so much fun.
This one is where a lot more of the manga influence that I do get comes in, because in this story in particular, part of the defense heavily revolves around what are basically mecha. They're machine armor that are piloted by human pilots with the express purpose of they were originally designed for the purpose of taking out air pirate ships really quickly, and eventually it evolved into a basically in of itself a sort of almost like another piece of transportation and heavy equipment for all sorts of everyday things. Like it became useful for farming, for carrying large like bales of hay, for lumberjacks and whatever. You could have a person in a suit carry a lot of lumber and whatnot. It eventually sort of became just another type of useful tool.
Well, actually, that sounds like a lot of fun, frankly.
It is, or at least I'm trying to make it that way.
Well, especially because like the idea of the mech suit is one of those things that in the real world is pretty impractical in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like wheels and tracks are just better than feet, right?
Yeah.
The amount of fine tuning that it takes to have a thing walk with two legs is so intense that it becomes a challenge to it. But at the same time, it's kind of awesome. You know? So one of the projects, but yeah. So, but I just there's something about that that just it's just so much fun. Now, here's the thing. I noticed on Twitter earlier that you had shared something from Matt C, who had been talking about that. I guess Wildstorm did a mech concept called Brass.
Hmm.
Is that something you were familiar with before at all, or?
I wasn't heavily familiar with it, but I do really, really like the character designs.
Yeah,
Mechanical
fun.
designs are great.
So, well, that's yeah. I think it was an interesting take on the whole deal. So,
I'm really passionate about how machines and whatnot are designed in fictional universes. Like, I'm in love with Star Wars for that particular reason because a lot of the machinery in Star Wars is just so. It's hard to describe it. It's really good mechanical design. It's very fantastical, but there's something about it that at a base level, it feels believable. Not realistic, but believable.
yeah, no, I think there's something about that. And of course, I think there's an appeal to it too, simply because of the fact that we have, I mean, that's our shape in a lot of ways. You know, it's variations on it, but it's still, there's a personality and body language that's implicit in something like that. And so because we speak without speaking, we have these nonverbals all the time. I think that feeds into that in a very natural and organic way. So, but yeah, so I think that's part of the appeal is the aesthetic nature
Yeah.
of that.
The mechanical designs in Star Wars have heavily influenced the way I design machines, but let's see. What's another.
Actually,
I'm trying to think of other really good examples of things that have influenced the way I like mechanical designs. I particularly love the way Akira Toriyama of Dragon Ball fame draws vehicles because he himself actually he's a real gearhead in real life. He loves motorcycles and cars, and even with a lot of his fictional vehicles, it really, really shows that he likes motorcycles and cars.
that's one thing I really appreciated in the Batman White Knight is Sean Gordon Murphy's gearhead. You can just tell. I mean, like every machine he draws, like you could build that thing and drive it. It's just got that love of muscle cars. I actually have. I'm really looking forward to the con next weekend because one of the artists who's going to be there, he lives in Fort Collins now. His name is Zane DeGain, and he grew up in California gearhead culture, and he's doing this comic called Fastback, which is if Quentin Tarantino directed a movie about a gearhead's cop daughter. That's what it is, and it's got that retro '70s feel to it that Tarantino puts in a lot of his stuff. But it's also like the cars are just he gets the action of it so much. I just love it.
I may
And
have to check that out. That sounds amazing, actually.
yeah, I'm not sure if it's available online at all, but I'll talk to Zane and find out if it's on sale online. I think he was saying last time I talked to him about it that he expected to have issue 2 ready for Fort Collins this year. So, yeah, no, kind of like Jackie Brown's got that. Easy Bake is asking about Jackie Brown. Jackie Brown's definitely got that kind of style, but so does Pulp Fiction, so does Reservoir Dogs, so does even the American segments of Kill Bill all have that '70s action grindhouse kind of feel to it.
His Star Trek movie is definitely going to feel like that because Star Trek is a franchise heavily associated with that time period.
Yeah. But yeah, that Tarantino just even, I mean, even Inglorious Bastards, while it feels in some instances feels very 40s, in a lot of ways it feels very 70s at the same time.
It feels like a 70s movie about the 40s.
Yeah, with the 90s sensibility, because you wouldn't get away with everything, even in a hard R 70s movie. Yeah, and Easy Bake says it just goes to show how consistent Tarantino is. The man likes what he likes and does what he does. So I definitely think there's something about that. And no, I would never pirate from Zane. Zane's a hell of a guy. I'll give him $5. Might even give him 10 and mail one to. Oh, probably not. But yeah, talking about designs and that whole kind of steampunk thing. One of the projects that is backburnered right now, but something that we are working on. Carl, have you read at all Forces of Good and Evil?
I have not.
Okay.
I should get on that.
No, you don't have to. But if you start now, you can read from the beginning. So it's only 3 stories in right now. So there's only 18 pages up right now. So
Gotcha.
one of our main characters, and he starts believing that he is a villain. The course of the story so far, he moves closer and closer to this heroism idea and everything. He's, of course, Chad Little, who is in hero school. He's plucked into hero school in the first story. And one of the projects we're working on is the next chapter of his life. Forces is a limited story. It's October 2014 through May 2016, and that's the end of Forces. Most of the junior year, summer, and then the senior year of these kids, right? Back in 2006 is when it landed. Did I say 14? Because it's supposed to be
4. 2004 to 2006.
I was a decade off because I'm old now. So the next stage in Chad's life is that Chad is going to go apprentice, and the Forces all takes place in rural Wisconsin for the most part, right? And so Chad is going to become an apprentice superhero in Lincoln, Nebraska, bringing him into my home state for various reasons. But they're in the big town of Lincoln. I am working with Rolf, our Forces pencil artist right now, and we are co-developing the adult adventures of Chad Little, the Tinker of Lincoln. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I've got a rough of the character design that we're using for Chad as a grown-up. And it's going to be fun. But let me find it here. Nope, not that one. Where'd it go?
It's interesting that that takes place in 2004 to 2006 because for me, that's actually kind of a bright spot in a popular culture, like around that early 2000s up until about 2005, 2006 era.
Yeah. No, I think that there's definitely an avenue of that. And part of it is because, I mean, when we created the comic in 2003, or the comic in 2003, and tried pitching it to Mad, and they weren't having it, we shelved it until we decided on this combined universe thing. And when we did that, it became a situation where became a situation where, is it up here? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I see it.
yeah, it became a situation where we were kind of wanted to set it in the now. Most of our stories we didn't want to do that with, but with horses we weren't going to name the time specifically. But as it took longer to tell the story, and as we all got older, we decided to admit to the fact that it was at its fixed points, and that's part of it. So this, of course, is a kind of a rough sketch of Chad in his superhero outfit, which is just work clothes. His power set he doesn't know he has powers at the beginning of of forces, but he learns it during the end of his junior year in high school. And what his power set is that he's a tinker. He can understand, repair, and fix virtually any machine. And he'd been using his powers his whole life, but he didn't know it because he tended to manipulate people around him, and through by convincing them to do what he wanted and everything else. And when he used to think he was just a bully and was forcing people and thought it was the brashness of his character, but as he learned in hero school, that wasn't quite how it panned out. He ended up discovering that his mom was a superhero, and there's a whole story involved in all of that you should read, Carl. Guilt trip. No, it's fine. But
Hey, it's
but
okay as long as I can guilt trip you into reading my stuff as well.
Well, yeah. Actually, you can blame Matt for that. It was his idea. So one of the things with all of that is that I had I'm going to scroll past some of the inspirations for the costume on here. Chad's going to have a special weapon, a hammer, that is going to act kind of like Batman's grapple launcher.
Okay, I like that idea.
It's an S-wing roofing hammer, but Chad is also of magical heritage, although he didn't know it. That's going to be coming up in the story where he discovers all of that. And so in his journey to the Celtic otherworld, he's going to learn all these magical smith techniques that he uses to build this hammer that is convertible. And so it uses the made-up science fiction for it. Is an elvish monofilament, and that can either be stiff or firm. It can be stiff or flexing based upon what he needs for the particular application. And it's a crystalline machine head that can take a couple of different shapes. It can work as a hammer, can work as a grapple, can grip onto things. And
okay, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was fun to concept. Here's the funny thing, right? So the symbol on his chest, right? Are you familiar with the World War II era meme "Kilroy was here"?
Yes, I know about that.
Okay,
I
so
find it interesting that to some degree memes as we know them today did even exist back then.
yes,
Just post
yes.
silly little the soldiers would just post silly little messages like Leroy was here, and the enemy forces were like, "What does it mean? What does it mean?" There must be some kind of
Well,
insidious purpose.
so here's the thing about that is I don't remember how I learned this, okay? But the whole Kilroy is here thing, right? That was the American addition to it. The words Kilroy was here. The little dude with the big nose peering over the wall with his fingers, right? That showed up originally by itself, and British soldiers brought it over. It was their thing, and they called it a Chad.
They called it
Right?
a Chad. Okay.
It was called Chad. That little dude with the big nose was called Chad. Now, I found this out, and I was like, "That's hilarious."
So wait, the meme that made the enemy forces freak out was literally the Chad.
Yes, yes, it was.
That's amazing.
And I named And the thing about the our modern meme about Chad being kind of this alpha male idea, I didn't name our character Chad after that. I
But
actually
he
named
fits it to a
character
T.
Chad after a guy I know named Chad. Chris and I both worked with a Chad and a Greg, and when we were developing forces, we were trying to make names for our main characters, and they turned out that their personalities kind of matched, or were the worst possible versions of these guys we worked with, right? Like the real Chad wasn't brash and bullying, but he was gregarious and boisterous, and we wanted that. And the real Greg wasn't timid and afraid; he was just quietly spoken. And so we exaggerated his personality, and we named our character that we wanted to have that exaggerated personality be Greg, right? But the good guy Greg thing didn't exist then, and the alpha male Chad didn't exist then. Our characters fit those stereotypes, so it was hilarious. Anyway,
Maybe
so
there's something deeper going on there, some kind of innate cultural memory.
I think maybe. Um, so the other thing is that so with Chad's costume, he's got the welding sleeves jacket that fits on there, and carpenter pants. I wanted to go into, but here's actually a screenshot from the article on Kilroy on Wikipedia. The figure was originally known as in the United Kingdom as Mr. Chad, and would appear with the slogan "What no sugar" or similar phrasing, bemoaning rationing. Right? It often appeared with little curly hair that resembled a question mark. Right? Now, there's a big debate about the origin of where the symbol came from. And some people think that it came from this circuit design, right? That was a common circuit design that was used by the British Air Force, the RAF. Their mechanics would use this circuit design in their layouts frequently. And you'll notice it has all of the same features as the Mr. Chad symbol, right? So this is the logo on Chad's shirt. His superhero logo is the circuit design Mr. Chad. So his whole thing is a deep cut. So, so you have back here, you've got the Mr. Chad right there on his thing. And I wanted, when I discovered all of this, it was like a coalescence. I was like, all of these things fit virtually perfectly with this tinker, this techno mage character. Not really a mage, but um, this character that we wanted to have in there. It's just this perfect thing right there. And yeah, okay. And in the chat, Easy Bake took off quite a while ago, and Stars is an old meme, and it's a meme magic right there. And I would have to agree. And the craziest thing about all of that um, is that magic is a subtextual element in Chad's parentage that we're going to discover as the thing goes on. So
Maybe you actually should make meme magic and stuff like that a canonical part of your universe.
It's probably going to be, honestly. We have a character, Game Boy. I've talked to you about Game Boy before.
Yeah.
And I saw you sub to his like his Twitter, follow his Twitter thing, and I haven't had time to do a single additional chapter in my little story. I feel really bad about that. But I mean, like magic and techno magic, definitely a thing in our universe. We have a whole world on the internet. So the idea that meme magic will pop up, my name will probably be a thing. It's probably not going to attach itself to Chad per se, but I am planning on in the dialogue I'm writing for the story that's on Patreon right now, Panic at the Ren Fair. There is going to be some jokes about the Chad meme and Chad's name because he doesn't really have a superhero name, and so somebody's going to give him grief about his name and try to use Chad as an insult. When I don't know if you're familiar with where the Chad thing came from, but it was in the early 2000s. It was like an insult that like urban Chicago people would use for the preps that lived in the suburbs.
It's ironic that it was initially used to like describe preppy people.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was the idea that they were preppy people would come in and act like they owned the town, and they're not from town, but they gallivant around Chicago like they own it, and so they think they're on the top of the thing, and so the idea that it's mutated into the concept of the alpha male generically is a perfect fit if you look at how ideas shift and everything. But, yeah. And I was about ready to stop talking at 9, and it's 9:45 now. So, oh, but yeah. So Chad Little, the Tinker of Lincoln, is that's going to be coming out. We're going to be doing a series of one shots probably that are going to expand on all of these Nebraska stereotypes and that are that intersection between the reason I brought it up in concept. You're talking about and mechs, in addition to Chad said of being able to just build anything. One of the elements that we're willing to put into it is that his method of transportation around Lincoln is we're going to have like a diesel punked out dirt bike. That's going to be
That's going to be cool.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to those stories. And I'm probably going to have Rolf do pencils on them, and then I don't know who I want to get to do the inks.
I have sullied my Spider-Man sketch by putting Pepe and Chad Kilroy in the background.
See, I wish I could see that now.
I'll post it later.
So, but yeah.
Although Pepe looks considerably different. He's drawn my way, so.
Awesome. So, but yeah, the other fun thing I'm planning on doing with it, probably if we do, I don't know if we'll do an Indiegogo launch or just do it as an e-comic. I'm not sure what we're going to do with it yet. Because I've got we're probably going to. What happened? Is everything there? My screen just went out.
Yeah, we froze up for a second there.
Oh, weird. But I'm not sure we're gonna do that. It's just like e-comics or. But I already have a theme song in mind for Chad. There is a Welsh folk tune called Bach and Bach Tinker, which translates into the Little Tinker, and Chad is a tinker, somebody who tinkers with stuff and fixes things. And he's also Chad Little. So I'm going to do a partial, like I'm going to rewrite the lyrics trying to use some translation stuff. I mean, I don't speak Welsh, but
it's amazing how everything's aligned so perfectly for this character.
I know, it's insane. And the crazy thing is like years, but I mean, like I had known about the song altogether, but years and years ago when we were deciding on Chad's ancestry, because we had the character, we didn't care about like his past thing, but we did a story called Parents' Day back in 2011, I think it was, maybe even 2010, where we introduced Chad's mom, and so we know Chad's mom was. We play into things, and I'd had this idea of the Tinker power set ever since I watched Heroes, and the people that are just intuitively good at machines, something that had been in my head. And so I said, I've got this idea for superpower. Let's work it with Chad's mom. Let's make her a tinker. So I wanted to call it because I thought that'd be kind of cool. And what if she was a legacy? And the idea about playing with Like tinker is just like an English language word for a tinsmith, right? It's just the slang for a tinsmith. And because a lot of tinsmiths fixed lots of things, it became a generic term for people that would fix anything. But tin is a huge part of Cornish culture, and I have this obsession with the Celtic nations. So I said, well, let's make her Cornish. Let's make that. Her name's Trevithick. Let's do that, and let's put that in there. And so I had that worked into. Yeah, she is a single mom. She goes by Little, which was her husband's name. Chad's dad's piece of crap. Took off with the Avon lady when Chad was little. That's actually a story element. But I worked all of this stuff from the thing, and then I ended up just snowballing Chad's whole lineage around, and Chad's mom's lineage around those scant ideas. And so he ends up having this mythic Celtic pedigree that he never knew about, because when his mom was pregnant with him, she quit heroin altogether, and just kept it a secret because she had enemies and that whole thing, and to be mom. And so that's part of the story. So Chad's going through in the last 3 stories that you can't read right now because they're not up. It's called Plain History, and it's about Chad discovering his mom's background. And it all just kind of fits together. So where the screenshot I was showing earlier, Chad in the future, is the intersection of all of these parts of his past and his mom's past and his own decision making. And so his heroic journey of self-discovery and where he ends up is a big thing. And for me, it's a lot of fun because it doesn't echo my own journey into adulthood, but it definitely was informed by it, and informed by, like we were talking with Doug earlier about fatherhood and its place in the hero's story, how that relates to the everyman concept. That's all part of Chad's journey, and so it's a lot of fun. And his journey is a lot more uplifting than the one we have for Greg, although they end up in very similar places, but at very different times in their life because of the choices that they make along the way. So, okay, I gotta pull the plug. It's been 3 hours on a 2-hour stream, so.
All right.
I want to read to you. Easy Bake Coven, before he left, said, I'll just put it up here. Before I go, I'd like to suggest a recent video that I've been enjoying. There may never ever be powerful as Stanislav Petrov by Emblem.
Okay, I screenshotted it, so I'll be able to remember it.
There you go. I don't know what that is, but if Easy Bake says check it out, it's probably worth at least an eyeball too. So, I want to try to. The one thing about this format is that, well, I guess if you check it out, maybe you can share the link on the Discord or something.
Okay.
Because I'm trying to get over there and like copy it, but it won't let me because it's got these little links for me to show the different things. Hey, look, there's that message. There's this message here. Here's Star saying, have a good night. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and bow out. I am really, really going to do it. Star, thanks for coming. Appreciate that. And to everybody who was here. If any of you end up watching this on the replay, it's much longer than normal just because, man, we got talking. And I didn't want to cut out as soon as everyone showed up, and then you had all this fun stuff to talk about, world building and Mac
all that fun stuff.
All that fun stuff. So,
and meme magic.
And meme magic, ancient meme magic. This is probably the weirdest stream we've done.
We went from Spider-Man to meme magic.
Well, the first, I mean, in terms of layout, because the first hour was pretty normal, you know, and then second hour was just a ramble fest. And then everybody showed up at like 5 minutes to 9,
And then suddenly your conversation became hyper focused.
yeah. Well, I wanted to give somebody something to talk about. So anyway, I gotta go, man. I'm late.
All right.
No one's watching, so
See ya.
later, man.